The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast for the Calvin Glen Alexander Tour here by another great Oklahoma State player here, this time the football team here. And Brendon Evers here joins the podcast. Brendon, thanks so much for joining.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, well, though, thanks for coming on here. In case Oklahoma State fans don't know, of course, you were part of the 2021 team in the Fiesta Bowl win and a bunch of other great memories. But really, the first and foremost thing here that I was looking up is you're the Big 12 champions for life represented in 21 as well. That's quite a prestigious honor, I would think. You can tell a little more about how you got that honor and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was easily one of the bigger highlights of my career. When NIL kind of started, obviously as a kid, you're like, oh, I want to get paid all this money and things of that nature. And you really don't think anything else. But luckily for me, I was at an older age in my life. I wasn't an 18-year-old getting handed a lot of money. So, values change and your perception on life really changes. Probably for the Oklahoma State fans that don't know, I come from, I'm adopted in my life. Both my parents adopted me at infant age. So for me, it was big about trying to give back to a cause that I really cared about. And getting to partner with the Dave Thomas Foundation, which for those that don't know, they're always on the Wendy's commercials, but they are the only national nonprofit foundation that works in foster home funding and adoption care. So getting to team up with a prestigious organization like that I still work with today was huge for me. And they kind of, led me in the right track and allowed me the resources that I could to help my local community. And that was such a big cause. And, Coach Gundy and the staff choosing me as a representative, something outside of football was just ecstatic for me. And, getting to talk on a commercial that comes every week during our games about something other than the aspect of just on-field play meant a lot to me, and still will to this day. So, yeah.
Of course. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense there. And I know Oklahoma State fans are always really appreciative of anyone who's doing something outside of just their athletic field as well, too, myself included. So thank you for all you've done. I do, of course, want to bring you on here, talk some football stuff, great memories for OSU, and then catch up with what you're doing today. But, first and foremost, want to ask, what's your kind of like best memory at OSU, whether it being on the field or off the field?
Me and Presley were actually just talking about this earlier in the week. I've got so many, you know what I mean? There's obviously, we go down to, in 21, we go down to Texas, big noon kickoff, end up beating what people thought was the de facto Big 12 championships in spectacular fashion second half. We get out of a hard place to play in Boise State that year as well, which that was definitely one of the harder games I've ever played in. There's Bedlam at home, 21 season, my senior night. There's obviously the Fiesta Bowl win. And even, it's going to hurt. They did a lot of people didn't pick up the last play, I would say, was one of my best memories of all time. In front of and make an impact. A sold out AT&T Stadium still, I don't think I'll ever have that quiet feeling again in my life. But even that, getting to represent the university on a magnitude of that level, one of the most watched conference games still to this day. It's, whether it's Malcolm, whether it's some of the other guys that I talked to, Malcolm, Brock, Cody Peel, it doesn't really matter. We all kind of go back to those games and just, reminisce about, that season in general. Even talking about Coach Knowles, those games always get brought up.
So with Coach Knowles, I know he's moved on from Oklahoma State, but he's gone to the other OSU and now to Penn State. Did you, when you were playing for him, did you have any idea, hey, he's got, what makes him this good of a coach? Is really my question.
a couple things I'll say about Coach Knowles. One, outside of being a coach, he's one of the most solid and true to be humans I've ever come across. Everything that he says, he means. And he lives by the aspect of, or the principle, I should say, of, my word is everything first and foremost. And when you play for him, you really get a sense of that. I'll even tell you a funny story. I mean, you go back to Texas Tech, when we played them in 21, shut them out. By my statistics, it was the best career game I've ever had, 2.5 sacks, however many tackles, whatever you want to say. I come in the facility thinking I'm, top of the world, and I pass him in the hall, and the only thing he has to say to me is, "Hey, on play 120, why didn't you not get to the A gap?" That's all he had to say. That's the kind of guy he is, where he demands perfection even though he'll never get it. And I think, probably stems back from his education. He's one of the smartest human beings I've ever been around. And I remember when he first came in, he's using a lot of vocabulary and words and terminology from his Cornell days. We're like, "Hey, coach, this is Big 12. All right, you got to realize who you're talking to, me included, so, but I mean, still to this day, one of the most analytical and just fast moving minds of football that I've ever seen, whether it be wore down at halftime and, you think you're going to get yelled at and all this other stuff. Wasn't a big yeller at halftime, but he would sure fill up that whiteboard with every adjustment we're about to make. And, as you could probably attest, it's evident in the second half. And that's why we blow people out of the water in second, because everything a team hits us on first half, he always took it personal to himself. It's that we're going to adjust in this way or that way and be successful at it later. And you saw it every single time that year, really every single time he was coaching for us.
Yeah, I do want to talk about a couple games specifically, but before I get there, I want to ask you kind of about your recruiting background here, and that's the type of stuff that, as someone who never played football in high school or really any sports, I'm just curious, how was kind of the recruiting aspect of going to Oklahoma State, and what made you choose OSU as well?
I mean, if I can remember back to it, I had a lot of, obviously, attention throughout the country, coming from a place that I did. I'd met Coach Clements very early in my recruitment, like sophomore year. And he's another one of those guys where his word means everything to him. He never sugarcoated what that experience was going to be like for me coming in. He never promised me things that he couldn't deliver, or that, and he never, and Brock can attest to this too, because he's trying to treat us like sons in the room, especially with me and him. You earned everything. He didn't hand you a single thing. And could I have chose the path of least resistance with other schools? Absolutely. But I knew for my development, whether it was going to get me beyond college or not, like I knew I needed to go play for this coach. Did I expect, Clint Spencer to leave and have some coaching flips? No, but I mean, looking back on it now, like I would have chose OSU every single time through my ups and downs. It all started kind of with Coach Clements especially, and then moving on up through the program, whether it's Coach Glass or even Coach Gundy to an extent, you know what I mean? Though he's not as, what's the word? He likes some offensive players better, obviously.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense there, of course, from his background. Growing up and, being from Bixby, were you always an Oklahoma State fan? Were you kind of a little bit of a Tulsa fan? Did you have any other schools you were ever, kind of rooting for besides OSU?
No, I come from an Oklahoma or OU background. We were season ticket holders literally till my sophomore year of high school. I just decided to go in a different path, and ultimately my parents knew, it was up to me, and I guess I've always been a rebel within the family, and it showed yet again when I got recruited to go to OSU.
Well, we're definitely glad you ended up in in Cowboy Orange for sure. I'm curious on some of the things here. I mean, you were second team academic All Big 12, first team academic All Big 12. I mean, you've got, I may not be saying this correctly, but the Werfel Trophy nominee as well. I mean, how did you handle juggling all of these things, of course, while being a student athlete? I've got a youngest brother who's currently about to go to college and be a student athlete himself. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, how you're able to juggle so many different things through your college experience.
I've always I get a lot of my work ethic, I think, from my father, just because, do rain, shine, or anything else. I saw that man wake up for work and support his family every day. I think that's where it originally stemmed from. I would say as I got to college, you always go and thank the people that helped you out. And whether it was the academic department, especially them, the player development department or the player staff, I mean, there's a lot, I didn't just do it on my own. I don't sit up here on a pedestal and take credit for juggling all those things. Later when you get down the road that a lot of these athletes are facing now, you better have a good agent, you better have a good financial advisor in your circle as well. There's always a group of people that help get to that point. And you never juggle it alone. So as good as, I would like to sit here and pat myself on the back, I wouldn't be where I'm at, or even at that point during college, without so many groups of people that were helping me stay focused and stay on the right path.
Yeah, well, you talked a little bit about the Boise State game, going up there. Was that the toughest non-conference environment that you remember being in, toughest environment you remember being in, of course, outside of, Boone Pickens Stadium is never a tough environment, but maybe the loudest environment you remember outside of Boone Pickens as well?
Probably one of the most foreign areas. How many Big 12 teams go play a Mountain West team, especially one that people love to watch because of the blue field and the history they have at home. It definitely rings true. It's the loudest, 40,000 seat stadium I've ever been in my life, by far. And, I caught a lot of flack from their fans pregame because I said, it's blue field's not that cool. Caught a lot of flack on Twitter for that one. Because they definitely came, ready for my head. But no, I mean, every experience is something different. That was just one where we knew going into that season what our expectations were, and that, a lot to get out of non-conference unscathed, is always hard, especially when you're going up against a team that I think evidently was in the conference championship that year, so, it's always hard, and, games like that make it memorable, coming down to one play. So.
Yeah. When Jason Taylor ends up blocking the field goal, I've been trying to figure out here, but I think you were on the defensive line there trying to also block, kind of get through to the special teams at that point on that play, right? So
yeah.
Did you think that field goal was going? Because once the kicker leaves the kicker's foot, I assume from your perspective, you think it's Taylor's behind you when he blocks. It looks like, or he's at least coming up and he's on top of guys jumping. Did you think it was going through? Do you have any kind of memories of that play specifically?
I mean, for what I can remember, on that year in the field goal block, because Coach Clements always, he was kind of in charge of that scheme. I just remember me and Tyler were right next to each other, if I believe correctly, and Jason's behind us and just says, pin the guys down, I'm gonna jump right behind you guys. And you hear the distinctive kick of the ball, and then I hear the thud of him blocking it, so I knew, I didn't see it, but I knew it wasn't going in. So that it's a nice sight to turn around and see the ball, off the pad for sure. And from what I remember, I think that kicker for Boise State was really good too. So,
yeah, that was one of the weirdest games as a fan watching, just because I thought we'd win, but then as the game's playing out, I'm like, it is Boise. It's not a Big 12 team. It's it's a non-conference game earlier on in the season, all type of stuff. But did you feel throughout your time at OSU, year over year, hey, we get better as the season goes on? And we kind of are always kind of getting better as weeks go by, because that's definitely how it seems as a fan.
It is. I think each year had, a specific feel to it. If you can go to 21, I mean, I knew, you feel out teams every year. We knew what the expectation was going in, because they said it essentially in spring ball that, it's conference championship or bust this year, no matter what. Gundy and Coach Glass and everybody kind of made that very clear going into it. And that's kind of how we trained in that offseason. And offseason hadn't been that hard since my freshman year, if I can remember. But 21, if you were leaving, Glass would put you through the ringer, but, older guys were taking it upon themselves, hey, you're not leaving the weight room until the upperclassmen say you do, type of thing. And it obviously translated later down the season, I think for that season in particular, once, that was those first 3 games, obviously Boise was a big deal. Now we have to go to, I think, Texas on big noon kickoff. We're not picked to win against, a future first round pick at running back. And it's stout. I mean, I think there's 2 or 3 first and second round picks on that offensive line at the time. A very good team, and then you have, we're the receiver. I mean, the scouting report was one of the longest ones I've seen. I knew once we knocked them off that we were going to be special. And, to the point where we're joking with Coach Knowles, like, yeah, when you get that head coaching offered at the end of the season, coach, just remember us type of thing. We're joking in the film room afterwards. But I knew if we could get the way that we got through them, which was just, I mean, I don't really know how to describe it other than, like we handed it to them second half. I knew once that game was over that we might not lose another game. So.
Yeah, well, I do want to ask you about the OU game, specifically about Bedlam. What were kind of like emotions going into it? I mean, growing up as an OU fan, then of course being at OSU for a while before the Bedlam game. What were kind of emotions, and how'd you feel, of course, after the win? Was there any kind of crazy stories of guys going out on the strip or anything like that afterwards as well too?
I'll keep the aftermath to myself. As far as the game, man, I mean, 100 emotions. It's senior night. My family's on the field pregame. I'm being introduced at senior night out the tunnel, and it's like Boone Pickens. Even at big games, like fans don't fill up till about 5 minutes to kickoff. We're out there 40 minutes before kickoff, and the stands are already completely filled. And just something in that energy that night. It's a different feel when you're on the field versus in the stands. I tell people that you can feel the noise on your neck when you're on the field when a big play happens. I just knew pregame that, it's going to come down to the wire, but we're going to win. I can just feel it. I could feel the energy of OU and Caleb Williams and all those guys. Like, and then I grew up with, half of that team, that are all Tulsa and Oklahoma City guys. I just had a feeling, we were the better team. We were the better defense, especially versus that offense. And thankfully it rained through, even though it was not easy.
Yeah, I know. I always talk a lot about the 2011 team because that team, of course, wins the Big 12 championship, but really that team is known for beating a ton of future NFL caliber quarterbacks. How did it feel kind of beating Caleb Williams? And I mean, you beat a future Heisman winner and a future first overall pick in the draft too.
Yeah. I mean, I would say a college version of Caleb Williams was everything that he was advertised as. I mean, you show a lot of respect to generational players like that. And I had been on the field with a lot of them. I put him in the same category as a Brock Purdy, a Jalen Hurts, a Kyler Murray. I put him in that same category, of players. And I got to, stand for what it's like to play all those guys. And he's just as advertised, for sure,
Well, with some of the guys you've referenced here, Presley, one of them and stuff, what do you think of the guys currently that are from OSU that are in the league that you either played with or you just kind of know are in the league, stuff like that? Do you still keep in touch with them frequently? And how's kind of that Cowboy network treating you?
Yeah. I mean, especially for me and what I do for a living, like, it always helps, business or not. I just keep up with the guys because you spend so much time and effort, and we always joke suffering, that you build family-like bonds with everybody. You know what I mean? You always make the joke that you have tighter relationships with these guys than you do your own family members at times, especially when you're in the middle of it, and it reigns so true later in life. These guys will be at each other's weddings or huge family events. It's truly a blessing to me because a small kid from Tulsa, Oklahoma, got to experience what the lives and backgrounds of 150 other guys that all come from different walks of life. I mean, crap, my roommates were Alex Halen, Matt Hembrow, from Chicago and Australia. I mean, I got to experience all types of cultures and relationships that I would have never thought of during my time. So I guess in the short answer, yeah, dude, I mean, it's integral for me that I always keep up those relationships.
Well, how many guys did you play against when you were in high school? Especially like how many guys went to OSU from Jinx? I know Big Jinx, of course, is the biggest, maybe the biggest rivalry in the state, if not by far and away the biggest rivalry in the state.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you this. I really enjoyed being teammate versus competitors with the likes of Dylan Stoner and Justice Hill. We're not fun guys to play against. I really appreciated them when they were on my team versus my opponent. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, probably much better off not have to scheme against them and stuff like that. Was there any specific player or team that gave you kind of the biggest challenge, or specific player you're like matching up with on the offensive side, offensive line wise, that you were trying to always kind of figure out, or that gave you any tougher issues than normal, I guess?
I mean, as far as player wise, like through the years, like no game is ever going to be easy, and it's going to be a battle when you're having to play against Brock Purdy. I joke with people all the time, like they can't believe stuff he's having there, and I'm like, I can, because I lived it for 4 or 5 years. Kid's been a dog his whole life, and he was always one that gave us the worst types of troubles. I mean, offensive line wise, I played against so many good offensive lines through OU, Texas, Iowa State. You see what the likes of some of the Texas guys, Creed Humphrey out of OU, at KC, he's going to be a Hall of Famer one day. Just some of those guys, it's fun to go back and kind of reminisce about some of these, future all pros and Hall of Famers that you played against, and competed with.
Well, when you're in high school and you're getting recruited and you got plenty of other guys you're probably talking with on the high school teams, what do you think separated you versus some others? Because at some point, just, everyone's really talented, right? But at some point, there's got to be some kind of difference that helps separate you versus, the rest of the group, and gets offered OSU and is playing D1 football.
I think, maybe you don't think about it so much in the recruitment phase until when you get there, because I saw a lot of guys weed out, not only at OSU, but just in the generalized sense. And it kind of goes unnoticed now, because now there's a transfer portal. Where there wasn't when I first initially joined college. It's just the attention to detail. A great quote I've heard recently is, the greats don't do extraordinary activities. They do the norm extraordinary. They're extraordinarily consistent, I should say. It's about just staying the path, and finding where your shortcomings are, where your strengths are, developing your strength, and really kind of repping those shortcomings to almost a monotonous amount. That's the quickest thing I learned on when I got to college, and definitely when you start getting around those pro guys a little bit more, that the transition from college to pro, at least at defensive line, is not that extraordinarily different. Just the best guys in the world have one or two things that they're just the best in the world at. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you played in so many great OSU games you talked about already. Did you have a specific one that was your favorite win when playing?
I mean, probably Bedlam 21 or Texas 2018, maybe. Whatever year the Barry Sanders retirement was, ring shirt or shirt, whatever it was.
Yeah,
we wore the throwback.
Yeah, that was 2018. I remember that Tylan Wallace catch. It's probably the most memorable play of that year, I would think. But with Taylor Cornelius as quarterback, and that just upsetting Texas at home. It seemed like they were all livid after that. At the end of the game, before it even ended, they were livid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That, and then obviously Fiesta Bowl win. So big for the program. And just a good way to end that chapter, even though it didn't end the way we wanted it to close that book on 21. Definitely, something special.
When Gundy says we've got a logo too, do you have any idea at the time that would be as kind of a big of a deal, where over printing shirts and making that into a slogan as fans. And I'm assuming the student athletes are kind of a part of that, but I just heard Gundy say so many different memorable quotes over the years. That was one that, of course, in the moment stuck out.
I can't remember so much, I didn't think I heard that exact phrase, but there was an emphasis, because a lot of us were down, the fact that we're all thinking we should be in the playoffs right now and we're not, you know what I mean? Their biggest thing going into that bowl prep was, we're not going to lay down for what the world considers a blue blood. The fact that we have history behind ourselves too, and we're just as good as the team we're about to go play in. He wasn't, that bowl prep felt like fall camp again. And I mean, it showed, because look how I could just remember how exhausted that team was second half. And I can, we're full go. Shout out to Rob Glass for that one. But, I mean, that his emphasis on, we're going to represent our school in the best way possible, because, I mean, that was outside of the national championship. I think that year was one of the most watched games in bowl season. So, and, one of the biggest bowl games we'd been to since, I think, like the Sugar Bowl. We played Ole Miss before I got there. So, it was it was big emphasis to the team going in that, we're going to go win this game or compete to our highest level. But, one thing about Coach Gundy is he definitely says the right things in big moments.
He definitely does. That was the game specifically I remember going to. I drove over. I was living in Los Angeles at the time and working for the Chargers, and I drove over, and I did not need an energy drink on the way back at all. I was still hyped up after the Fiesta Bowl win and was all sudden go. So that was quite a memorable game. But do you remember kind of what, like, second half adjustments, or was there anything overall that you remember from that game of like, hey, we're doing this a little differently? Because that was just tremendous. The defense just shut them down. I mean, Notre Dame didn't do anything really at all, until the very, very end where they made it close, kind of, but still they would have had to get an onside kick, and every defense just shut them down in the second half.
Yeah. I think, it was just us settling in, not having Coach Knowles there obviously affected a lot of us on defense. So us just settling in and just knowing that, we know this defense in and out. We've literally schemed these guys a month. So we know what's going to happen. They're not going to change a lot second half, especially with the new coach on the other side, and just settling in and trusting ourselves, you know what I mean? That's all we really needed to do. It wasn't extraordinary effort by any means.
All right. Well, I want to ask you what you touched on a little bit here, but want to ask you now what you're up to and, life after OSU.
Yeah. So, after college, had a couple of tryouts, a couple of opportunities outside. And then, many don't know, I had 3 shoulder surgeries in a calendar year back in 22. My body just wasn't having it anymore. Probably could have kept playing football, but I took care of school for a reason, and I allude back to, so thankful for all the help that the academic and the business school did for me, because it's provided me the life I have now. Once I retired from football, got into the financial industry. In the last 2 years, was working as an RA, and then most recently now I'm a private banker with JP Morgan. So now my emphasis really is I work with high net worth individuals. Mostly I get to do financial literacy and planning, banking for athletes and entertainment individuals, in the process of working to be a certified NFL PA advisor, to work exclusively with NFL players, just because that's a very, obviously not, I don't want to say niche market, but a market that I understand in and out and understand the athletes' needs. And especially it's trickled down now to the NIL space in the college athletes. I do a lot of consulting on that side as well.
That must be kind of a cool insight into how all that stuff works still today, right?
It's not your atypical individual that's retiring at 65 and needs an estate plan. The biggest thing that a lot of people don't realize with these athletes and why they run out of money so well is people like you and me now have, once you get into the workforce, you have 50 years to maximize your income, where your income's expected to rise every year once you enter the workforce. So you have 50 years to fund the next 20 after you retire. With most athletes, they have the next 3 to 4 to fund the next 50. It's a complete flip-flop thing. They will never make more money than they will in those 5 to 7 years of playing. It just won't usually happen. A big realization that I'd had to overcome, and that some of these athletes don't know yet, but it comes for everybody. You don't get to walk away from the game. The game walks away from you at some point or another, unless your name's Tom Brady. So providing those guardrails and plans and having, a very intelligent mindset moving forward on financial literacy is just massive. And I've seen it work both ways. There's hundreds and hundreds of case studies of athletes that do it right versus not. And I don't consider myself a success story by any means, because I didn't get paid, the money they get paid now in NIL kind of makes me jealous. But even then, if I can just provide a little bit of advice and insight to just dialing back and structuring your life now, it's going to pay so much dividend, because you're already walking away from most of these kids, walking away from college debt free, which is more than 90% of people our age can say. And they don't really know what that means until they really start having to pay taxes and all this other stuff that the real world requires. And not having to worry about student loans or holding exorbitant amounts of debt sets them, I'm light years ahead of people my age, just because I don't have to worry about student loan debts. So now what can we do now that I'm at an advantage versus most of America? And that's kind of my objective, is helping these athletes set up their lives for the future, because they don't realize the position they are in, kind of gift that they've been handed, getting to go to school for free and play football. It feels like a struggle in the moment, but man, I can never talk about how grateful I am to have that opportunity and go to an institution like OSU that prepared me for the kind of job I'm in now.
Yeah, I want to say we might have had a class together once or twice, just because you were in the business school and I was too. But that's the you were talking about your shoulder surgeries earlier. That's the one thing I was looking up this morning a little bit, and doing some stuff where I was looking up your TikTok, and I was like, man, you've got some pretty hefty scars, on your shoulders and stuff like that. But you were definitely still working out, in between off seasons and stuff, and get ready for the next season like no other.
Definitely another shout out to just all the people that worked with me through training and rehab. Wouldn't have been able to be as successful as I was at that point either, without injuries. Just you can ultimately just chalk it up as unfortunate events, which most of them were. But like I said in the beginning, I wouldn't change anything, because it's provided me a lot of the ups and downs of being a football player, but help you a ton too. And you're so much far ahead than most people that haven't faced those types of adversities, whether it's in business or just life in general. If you can look at those, abnormal events as a learning opportunity, which I ultimately had to do, it's helped me a bunch in my development just through life in general.
Well, where can everyone find you and reach out to you? I know I reach out to you on LinkedIn, so I know you're active on there, but where else can everyone find you and kind of get more information if they want to take up on some financial resource information here? Yeah,
LinkedIn's probably the best place for me. Or that, or I'm with the JP Morgan Private Bank, Oklahoma market. I'll just search JP Morgan, look up my name, and I'll be in there. For anybody that needs any type of advice on that realm as well. But Cal, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. It's fun to reminisce and kind of talk. There's a lot of OSU people in my local office that always want to know the ins and outs, so I'm pretty used to it by now.
Sounds like it, but to me, as someone who did, on-court announcing for, a little bit, and was announcing some softball games and stuff like that, and then went on to do some bigger and better opportunities after college. It's truly awesome to hear about, the other side of it, right? Of, I'm in the library studying until 2 a.m. or whatever, but I don't have practice at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever you guys are doing. There's just kind of the duality of life, right? Just as, I had some part-time jobs on campus, but I was able to fit that in my schedule. I didn't have to make sure my class schedule was tailored around my number one priority of, keep my scholarships, all sorts of stuff. So it's always great to hear from you for sure, and especially any other OSU athlete, kind of hear how you guys managed all of it, because it truly seems kind of an incredible thing.
It is. I think it's more incredible the work that the support staff does, Marilyn and Nikki Jones over there in the academic center. that locker room would be empty without those two, you know, and all the support staff they have under them. I give them always the credit. You know, I wouldn't have walked away with OSU with 3 college degrees without the likes of them. You know what I mean? And had the life I have now to get to work at a prestigious institution like this, because, and what I tell athletes a lot is go for the harder degrees. They will help, because companies like this want to hire athletes, because my bosses never have to worry about me waking up early and coming to work. It's all I've ever done. They just feel, you know, the only difference is I don't have Code Glass yelling at me if I show up late, you know, but they don't have, you know, companies really want to hire, you know, whether it's football or any other athlete, male or female, they want to hire athletes because they already they know what it's like to work hard for a goal in mind. So taking that time and extra effort to go get sought after degrees that these big conglomerates want, I'm telling you, will pay so much dividend, because you already have that in as an athlete. You're already a step ahead of everybody else. So for any athlete that's out there, I'm telling you, just put in the work for the next 3 to 5 years, and it will make your life so much easier down the road. You will be so much farther ahead. And also, to that point, shake every hand and smile at every person because you have no idea who's going to hire you one day.
Yeah, I'd say my dad would definitely echo that. He was the guy who tutored, he tutored a couple of Oklahoma State guys, but one of them I think was Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas when he was at OSU back in the 80s. He was part of that kind of academic resources and stuff. And, you know, I needed him to help tutor me when I was in college a little bit, and always needed his help. But, you know, I'll leave out here on one thing, Brendon. We've got one thing in common. Both of us went to OSU for 6 years and both graduated with 3 degrees. So props to you there. You know, thank you. My route was I know a lot different. And the reason why I stayed 6 years was not so I could keep playing, but instead so I could have another year to intern or something. But thank you so much for joining here on the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. If you're not already, please follow and subscribe to the CGA Tour. And we'll catch you guys again soon. Again, Brendon, thanks so much for joining here. And I'll have all his stuff linked here in the description below, wherever you're listening.